Morning, YouTube. So here's another one, and if you can't tell, I got a thing about messing with kids in the Bible. This one's always been of particular interest to me. The story of Jephthah. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I'll give you the breakdown. Judges 11. Jephthah is a man of God, and he's in this war. Now he goes out. There's a whole lot of stuff that's been going on. I'm not going to read all of that to you, but you can read this for yourself. He comes to this point where basically he gets frustrated and says, well, it starts out in 29, verse 29, saying, "Then the Spirit of the Lord came on Jephthah." Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's not it's not a random statement of Jephthah's. He was actually, according to this, surrounded by the Spirit of the Lord, influenced, being talked to by, whatever came on is supposed to mean, except for the modern day nastiness. So, this goes on and says, Jephthah made a vow to the Lord. "If you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in triumph from the Ammonites will be the Lord's, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering." Okay, now, this goes on. It ends up being his daughter. His daughter is the first thing that comes out of the doors when he comes home. And there's this whole deal. Well, let's see. It says, "My father, you have given your word to the Lord. Do to me just as you promised, now that the Lord has avenged you of your enemies, the Ammonites. But grant me this one request. Give me 2 months to roam the hills and weep with my friends, because I will never marry. You may go." And he let her go for 2 months. And blah, blah, blah. She wept because she was a virgin. Now, there's several issues that are very, very wrong with this whole chapter, really. And that is that, one, I've heard defense that everything that Jephthah was doing was right, because he was in the presence of the Lord. Therefore, he was being influenced by, holy perfection. I don't know how far you want to take that kind of apologetic, but all you're doing there is just really shooting yourself in the foot, because if that's your argument, then you're saying that he didn't really have free will. If he was being influenced directly by the Holy Spirit, it really wasn't him talking. But the next problem is that he says the next thing that comes out of my house to meet me. Now, using basic logic, there's only very few things that could be coming out of the house. It could be a member of the family, it could be a servant, it could be an animal. It could be like a neighbor, I suppose, but then one would have to ask why a neighbor was in his house without him being there, etc., etc. So really what this boils down to is there are 2 types of things that could come out of the door, an animal or a human. Now, I am curious to know why a human would have been implied in his statement of whatever comes out to meet him. I take any single one of these verses of the Bible, and all I have to do is, apply it to my own life. Would I be okay with this? What would I mean by this? What would this mean to me? And I'm sorry, but I, would never, ever tell somebody or something that they could have as a burnt sacrifice anything, that comes out of his door. Because obviously, I think it's fair to say he didn't want to burn his daughter alive, at least I hope. And if he did, then he's a sick, sick man and not worth mentioning in the Bible at all. So if the Bible is supposed to be mentioning these good people, which obviously it's not, because it's all about Yahweh, and he's not good, but then why would it be implied that it's a human coming out? Because basically what that's saying is that he was perfectly willing to sacrifice a human, if you believe that he's actually implying that a human could come out to meet him. The second thing is, even if he didn't, even if it was a stupid slip of the tongue, what kind of deity is actually going to make him go through with that for a human error? Because then we're just going back to Bible gods sucking. sucking a lot. But and there's another problem here though. She's all complacent about her being sacrificed as a burnt offering to God. Like it's not even an issue. He seems to be more broke up about it than she does, the dad. But she goes and cries for 2 months with her friends in the hills because she was going to die a virgin. Now, granted, I understand that different cultures, different meanings, and all that stuff. Virginity is a huge thing, not just back then, but in that culture in particular. Women, of course, were treated like cattle, and there's this Bronze Age mentality that goes on. But I would think that if you were full-on accepting of God's plan and His decisions and whatnot, and you thought that you were going to heaven afterwards, then the virginity kind of takes a bullshit back issue. It's as though, like, you're gonna stab me and burn me and set me on fire and I'm gonna die, then that's okay. That's all okay, except my virginity is what's, making me really unhappy. It doesn't make any sense. And then to finish with this, this is kind of like the whole Abraham and Isaac thing. People tend to use that as an example of God's grace and God's mercy and God's, testing us. And of course, I'm sorry, any deity that's trying to test me by pretending to make me kill my own family is one sick fuck. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie Saw, but that's exactly what Yahweh has set up in the Bible by doing that kind of shit. I'm going to play a game with you, and I'm going to make you do stuff that you don't want to do. And it's too bad because I'm God, and therefore you have to do it. Oh, no, but it's okay because I'm good and I'm perfect. I don't think so. What kind of dad is actually going to go through with burning his own daughter alive? It's ignorant on every level. This story makes no sense, no matter how you try to play it out. And the worst I heard was that they were actually trying to defend Jephthah in that he was giving God the option. And I found that very funny because that's, again, we've gone around this before, but this is implying that humans have the ability to control God. And this is an issue like prayer. How many people praying the same prayer does it take to make God change His mind? And if God changes His mind, does that mean His plan wasn't perfect? This goes in a big, big circle. So, there you go. Another example of Bible God being a sick, maniacal, manipulative, bloodthirsty freak trying to be portrayed as a good, loving God by a person who's a psychotic idiot who is trying to be portrayed as a man of God. Way to go, apologetics. Now, I have a little follow-up with this. If you're a Christian, you believe that this is all in here to be demonstrative, to be a lesson, to be good on some level for us. Now, I want to ask you something. Abraham and Isaac, as sick and twisted and demented as that little story is, I could understand the point as an allegory, as an example, I guess. But Jephthah actually goes through with it. He actually kills his daughter, burns her alive. Well, I can't say alive, excuse me, that's inaccurate. Burns her to death, though. A burnt offering. Now, if these are things that are done of God and because God told them to, let me ask you something. You guys hear about these stories about mothers and fathers who hear the voice of God and kill their children. There's a woman who killed, I think, her 3 children in a bathtub. There are stories about people who have heard the voice of God telling them to stab their children so that they can be, redeemed of their sin. And this is not isolated. These are not, I'm not picking like these extraordinarily rare things that happen once in a great freaking while. No, sadly, you can hear many of these cases throughout the year. If you look at the history of stuff, it is appalling how many parents have done atrocities to their children, claiming that they are hearing the voice of God, or that some God is telling them to do, whatnot. Now, before you all get indignant and shut off your ears, how do you know that it's not your God? How do you know? What is the difference between Jephthah and his daughter? What is the difference between Abraham and Isaac, those stories, and somebody doing the same exact thing today? There is none. The only difference to you is that it's appalling because it's actually happening, because it's not just some story in the book. But all these things that you defend your God doing is the same God, allegedly, that is telling the same people to do the same things today. And you deal with that. Have a good one.